Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So in this one, I'm going to cover the GDXR VR template, which I've been working on. So if we swap over, I can show you what I've got. And the idea is that I'm going to show you what's in here first, and then I'll show you how to use it. So those over on Patreon who have access to the download can kind of get a head start on it and then see how it's working. And then maybe some others like out there who are interested could probably head over there, pick it up if you want, and then drop it into your project and go from there. So first thing is we've got a few features that I've added. So in the overall template, it might be actually easy to just jump in. Let's just do that. So if we jump in, we can see that we have our controllers, default as before, and then our movement. So we can move around, walk around, do all the original fun stuff that was included in the template. But what we also have is if we use the menu just below the left thumbstick, is we actually have the option to change our hand type and movement type. So for movement type, we have teleport options. We have shift movement. This is a work in progress, so I can teleport and then kind of slide to the next location. I'm currently working on making this a little bit more accurate. We then have our continuous movement. And you can see here we've got two other options on this. We have moving direction of the player camera, which is currently set, or moving direction of the player controller in which it's facing. So at the minute, if I look around while I hold the thumbstick forward, I actually move in the direction of the camera. And then if I go to the movement type and I move in direction controller is facing, I can actually move forward with that. And then based on whereabouts I point the controller, we move as well. So there's a couple of different options for movement included in this. And the idea is to add as many as we can without it being too much, but make it easy enough that you can provide options that work for you. And you can change all of these inside of the actual VR pawn, which I'll show you to do. So if you don't want to include the options here, you can just have them set and then have it set up by default. So the next thing is the hands. We have two individual skeleton mesh hands, which are rigged up so you can rig them individually and work together. So they actually have touch input on the controllers, and then if you touch the face buttons, the thumbs move as well. Bit of options. And with this one specifically, if you hold the grip button and then just slightly touch the trigger, you can use the finger to point and interact with any UMG that's in your scene. So if let's restart. So to cover that again, we've got our movement types and hands. So movement, I'm going to set to continuous, movement direction of the player camera. Hands. So we've got the hands that appear. So these hands are actually set up to work with sockets on actors. So if you pick something up, so these ones are set to the grip or the free lock. So it'll just grab it wherever it is and it'll keep the mesh as they are. However, with some of the other stuff, if you apply socket slim for the right and left hand, you can see that you can actually snap the controller to it. And we can see this is a better example on this lever. So we can grab it and then we can move the controller. I am currently working on setting the rotation so it follows the player. So it'll be a bit nicer, but that's going to be in a future update. So if we actually go to our little armory, and we've got a door handle, which I'm currently working on, and then we pick up our weapons, we can see that we actually can have custom animations that snap to our hands. And when we pick up weapons, we can actually press the trigger to play another animation if we want them to. So we can have that feedback as it is. So you can do it with both. And it actually feels quite nice. So this could be something that's worth checking out if you're interested in that. And then with this one, we actually have the sword, which doesn't actually have a hand animation because it's just a sword, you don't really need it. So you do have the options for that, and I'll show you how to set that all up. So that is movement and hands, and we've also got the weapons examples in there. We then have climbing. So there's two sets of climbing that's included in this. I've created a system where it uses a physics material for this example. So when you grab, it's actually detecting the physics material of the ladder. So you could mask out different areas. Let's say we just wanted a material on here. You could have a mask which only applies the physics material to that. So that's the only location you could grab. And that works for these like monkey bars here as well. So if we go up to it, we can grab these and then go all the way along. So at the minute, I'm working on getting the controllers to work. So if I hold on with both of them, that they work together. However, it'll detach the second one at the minute, or the first one that was in there. We also have an example of a static mesh. So this is a static mesh which doesn't actually have climbing enabled at the minute. But what I can do is I can enable the tag climbing. So if we hop out and then I select the actor, and I just do tag. Oh, I can change it to can climb. So it should work. You can see that we go over to the actor. We apply the actor tag can climb. And then now I can actually climb up on top of this if I wanted to. And then kind of move myself down. So it's kind of a couple of things to think about with it. And a couple of ways it works. So that is hands movement interactions. We've got some draws, for example, which I'm currently working on, trying to make them a little bit smoother. But we'll have custom animations for those at another point. We then have our gaze example. So as you can see on the screen, there's a dot. There's a white dot. And if I hover over an actor that actually has the interface, we can actually update stuff like that. So you can add and remove all of this if you want to, but you can use that as a way to interact with different things if you need it. The levers work as well. But ideally, I think right now it's kind of the movement-based stuff is kind of what we got. And then if we jump out, we can take another look at what we've got in here and how it's all set up. So the idea behind the project is a lot of it is driven from the grab actor component. So if I have a look at this, so I've got the grab component here, and you can see there's a grab from distance component on this, which allows us to interact with it. In the template on the Patreon, this is disabled just because there's a little bug. After you grab it, it just continuously fires. So I just detached it, but if you want to use it, you can simply connect these back up and then jump into the project, and you'll have 2 line traces coming from each controller. If we now point the line traces at one of these actors, you can see we get the circle up here. And then when we press and hold the grab button, they actually come towards us. So you can use that if you want to, and it also works with the weapons, or at least it does with the guns. Don't think I put an animation here. So we could grab them through the wall, and you can see that we actually have them snap through. So it's kind of up to you how you want to use it, but it's there if you do want to use it. So by default, the VR pawn that's included is set up to use teleport locomotion. So if you want to switch that to use motion, like smooth locomotion, so you can walk around how I normally do it, all you've got to do is look for the variable use smooth locomotion, which is, you'll see that if we have a look through, we've got the variable use smooth locomotion. If we set this to true, it'll automatically change it. So when you start the project, your snap image turns to the right controller, and then you can actually walk around with the right as well. The left controller, sorry. So you can use that thumbstick to move around. And then if you want to use shift movement, all you've got to do is set use smooth locomotion to false, which is done by default. And then in shift movement, drop down for the variables, there's a use shift movement variable. You set that to true. And then in here now, when you start the project, you'll actually use that motion instead. So that's how you can set it up by default. So if you want your project to only use one style of movement, you can do it that way. So it's just the shift movement and then the use smooth locomotion. It's kind of up to you where you go with it. But making use shift movement false and then use smooth locomotion false will just allow you to teleport like regular. So the VR HUD is probably the next part to look at. We actually have an arrow in our camera here called VR HUD offset. What you can do is you can select this and then add VR HUD, and there'll be a component, which is a custom component. And when you add it as a child of the VR HUD, it'll then snap to that position. So if we go to viewport, we have a look here, we can choose how far away from the camera our HUD is. But if we now press start, you'll see that we actually have a button on the screen, and that's kind of representing our HUD right now. I haven't got one set up. But what that does is the component itself spawns an actor called VR HUD, and it's going to have some other functionality in there soon, which is the reason that I set up as a component. But what you can do is you can open up the VR HUD blueprint, so BP_VR HUD, and you'll find that it's just a widget. So if you want to have a custom HUD or custom widget or anything like that, just open up the BP VR HUD and then just set the widget class to be what it is you want it to be. And then you can actually just run this as a normal widget, same way you typically would with any other setup. You just need to make sure that in the VR pawn, that the VR HUD component is a child of VR HUD offset. And then if you want it closer or further away, you can just drag that arrow in and it'll update it for you. So when you start, it'll actually be in a better location. The HUD itself is set up with a material which doesn't occlude if it goes behind objects. So in our widget, we have a custom pass-through material which disables depth, so you don't actually have to worry about it overlapping or colliding with objects. Works quite nice. It'll always appear in front of whatever you've got in your scene. So that's it for the VR HUD. Let's close those down. Gaze interaction, actually, that's a good one to go to. So the gaze interaction component. So this is all done with a component. If you don't want the gaze interaction, just literally delete the component. And then you can also delete the HUD if you don't want those. So if we take a look at the gaze interaction component, which we have right now. So the gaze interaction component has to be a child of the camera, and that's because it uses the position of the camera to determine whereabouts the user is looking. So if you don't want to use this component, just simply delete it, and then you should be able to use your project as is. You won't have to worry about it. But if you do want to use the gaze interaction component, what you can do is you can set the trace distance, so how far away from something you have to be before you can look at it and interact with it. The icon distance from the camera, so how big the reticule is on the screen. By default is 250. The timer should be set to 0. And then we have the gaze timer length. So if we jump into the project and we hover over our point on the screen to look at our object, you can see the timer goes around in circles. And that controls how long it takes for it to activate the object you're looking at. So if I delete the HUD so we don't have the button, we take the interaction, and then we can set the gaze timer length to about 5 seconds. So now when we look at something, it takes quite a few more seconds before it's actually complete. So you've got a bit of control over this to decide what you want to do with it and how long you want. 2 seconds normally feels about right, but we'll leave that as it is. And the gaze component itself works by spawning in a couple of things. So if we jump over to the gaze component, which can be found inside of our components folder within blueprints, we got gaze interaction component. You see it's pretty heavy. If you want to take a look through it, feel free to do so. I think there's some variables here I've got to clean up in the next build. But if we go over to VR template and we take a look at the gaze example, it's actually quite simple to set up. So the gaze itself runs off a blueprint interface. So if you want the gaze interaction to interact with something in your scene, all you have to do is go to class settings, make sure it has the VR gaze blueprint interface, and then give it the event gaze hover. That'll actually fire it every time you look at it. So once the timer counts down, this will be fired. So the timer's all handled within inside the component, and the UMG that accompanies it. So that's pretty much it for setting that up if you want to use the gaze interaction. So if we move over to the drawers, since we're here, what we can do is we can have a look at how those are set up. So if we open up the draw blueprint, you'll see that there's actually nothing in it. The idea was to keep this as simple as possible. So all you have to do is under your scene component, you add the component sliding component, which is a custom one. So sliding component, you add that and then add a spline as a child of that component. So it'll be spline, and you want the utility, so spline utility. And then, so that's its own thing. And then you can have your static mesh, which would be the draw or the object that you're moving. And underneath that, you just put the grab component. So you add the grab component as a child of the static mesh. And then in here, you've got grab type. You just set that to levers and draws, or levers and draws. And you make sure it has the grab component class sliding component, so it knows which one it's talking to. And then from here, you can choose whether you have like what hand animation you use. So you can use the drop down here for handheld. If you want to use a trigger animation, so when you're holding the draw, if you press the trigger, For some reason, you could have that play another animation, which is quite helpful if you want to, but by default, you should just leave that as off. And then you don't want grabbing from a distance, so that should be false. So compile and save. And that's pretty much it for setting up a draw. It's quite simple. And now what you can do is, if you want to, you could select the spline and you could select the endpoint, and you can use this to control how far out that draw comes, and it'll snap to that point and it'll stop where it's needed. So that's it for the draws. So to set up levers, they're quite similar. However, the hierarchy that you put it in is just a little bit different order. So if we open this one up, we have our static mesh. And then in here, we just have a lever component, which is its own thing. You don't need to do anything here, so don't worry about that. And then you just have the grab component on there, and it will use the rotation from the pivot point of the object that's in there to figure it out. So one of the things that I need to point out doing this is all of these static meshes, so the draw and the levers, they have sockets built in, so they know where to attach the skeletal mesh hand. So if I go to static meshes and we open up the draw, we can see here that we have 3 sockets. We have, in this one we've got 2 sockets, we didn't need the first one. So we've got left hand and then right hand, and that's all you need. Depending where you place this will be where your controller appears. So the easiest way to search this is just do the Oculus, because our skeletal meshes don't show up here. So you can kind of see whereabouts the controller mesh is going to be when interacting with an object, as it'll snap to these points. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like all of these static meshes and skeletal meshes do need the sockets, and this works the exact same for our weapons. So if we open up our sword, you can see I've got 2 controllers just as a representation, and this has a grip point, a right hand, and a left hand, and you just kind of place them where they need to go, and you can actually have the hands snap to those. If not, the hands will by default snap to 0, 0, 0, or the mesh's center point, which is more accurate. Another thing to note while in here is that the objects will be grabbed based on where the grab component is. So if we have a look at the grab component, it might be easy to actually open this up. We can't see the grab component itself, but if you want to rotate an object or have it placed in the hand a different way with a different rotation, you just need to rotate the actual grab component itself, and that will tell you which way the controller is facing. But yeah, you just make sure you rotate the grab component, and that'll rotate the object in your hand to a different orientation. So it's just the easiest way to set up the angles. The door handle is going to be its own component. I'm currently working on that, so don't worry about the door handle just yet. Climbing. So the climbing itself is set up in 2 different ways. There's the ability to use a tag. So if you want to climb on anything, let's say one of these walls, you could just give it the actor tag climbable. So this cube has it on by default. So I search for tag. You can see it has can climb, and then you can climb on any object or up any surface without having to worry about where your hands are. However, in this case, we have these meshes, and we don't want to be able to climb on specific parts. So what we've got is in our object, we have a physics material called PM_climbing, and you can find that in the VR template physics materials. And all you have to do is apply that to any object or any actor and material, and you'll be able to climb on that material. So the idea is it does a check based on where your grab hand is, and then goes from there. So overall, pretty simple to set up. You can have a tag or a physics material, and let's say we wanted it on this wall, you would just grab your wall instance, go down, and then physics material override. You just literally drag and drop it on there, and now you should be able to climb on that wall. Cool. The grab component. So the grab component has been heavily modified. So if I select one of these cubes, for example, and then we select our grab component, you'll see here that we have different grab types. And in here we have snap VR hands, and then the levers and draws. You can kind of guess what they do. But the snap VR hands custom anim is probably the one that you're going to use if you're using custom animations, such as the gun and the sword. So in here, if we select the grab component, you see it's set to snap VR hands custom, and then the held animation is just grab. And in the weapon, we've got grab component snap. Yeah, so I renamed that one. But we've got grab component snap VR hands, pistol held animation, and in this case, we're using a trigger animation. So that's true. And then the trigger animation is pistol fired. So we have pistol held and pistol fired. And then we can select these from the drop down. So these animations are set up through our hands. So each hand has their own set of animations. So this is the right, and then this is the left. They're basically mirrored of each other. And these can be set up by going to our VR hands folder, go into grip state, and then we add the new animation that we want in here. So we go add enumerator, and then what we can do is inside of our animation blueprints for each hand, we can open it up. And inside of our, so you start in the event graph. If you go to the grip states, or you go for the animation graph, sorry, you can see in here we have a state machine, and these act as our individual hand animations that we're going to go for. You can open this up, and then you can see here, this is basically our pistol. So this would be our pistol animation. We've got the held, and then we press the trigger. So we choose pistol fired, and then we can change the animation to this. So we can kind of go back and forth between them. So let's say you've got a new object and it has its own animation. What you could do is you could go to grip state, we do add enumerator, and we'll do custom example anim, hit enter, save, and then in our right hand animations, we would have an animation here that we want to correspond with that. Now in our animation blueprint, we can set these up to work as we want. So we would bring in a weapon, let's say. We connect these up like so. And then for our checks, we want to see what it is. So we would open up the first one, and we get grip state used, get, and this listens to our controller and our player. So we hit equal enum. We select custom example anim, and we connect that up. And then we do the same thing for the lower one. However, this time it's going to be a equal open, because our animation is always going to go back to open. So we get our use script state, we do equal to open, and that's it set up for that. So now if we have a weapon, so this is animation right held, we can go to our objects, and then we can change our grab component to grab type custom example anim. And now if we pick this up with our right hand, I believe it's the one that I changed, we can select our movement type to continuous, hand type to custom, or skeletal mesh hands, run in here. And now when we pick this up, we should have that gun animation, which you can see it is set to. So you would just rinse and repeat the same process with the left hand. And then now what you can do is you can just have each row for each of your objects. So it kind of stops it from going back over itself, and it'll just be basically a list that you create and add up for what you need. And there's nothing stopping you from reusing animations and all that kind of thing. So that's it for this. I'd highly recommend checking these out, but it's a case of get your animation in, and then for the return, you want the open. And if you've got a trigger animation that plays afterwards, you go from the default animation to that. What you want to do is you want to have it so it's equal the new one, so in this case pistol fired. And then on the return, you just do pistol held. So if it's equal to what it was, it just goes back that one step, and then you don't have to worry about it. And you can actually have other animations hooked off this if you need to. I am currently working on a better implementation for figuring out the hands and the positions. Because at the minute on the static mesh, you want to open it up and you do want to test the controllers or check the positions for the animations. However, you can only have preview static meshes in here. So if you know a way to get skeletal mesh details to show up on this, so I can preview the hands in it, that would be absolutely awesome. Or another way of doing it would just be super helpful to see. But I think that is everything. I'll check my list. Oh, snap movement location. So we also have these here. They'll probably go to another place later on. But if I jump right in, what you can do is you can teleport over there. And the idea between these is like something like maybe an ArcViz example. So you want to move to an exact location without having a nav mesh everywhere else. So you want to control exactly where the person goes. You can hover over it and you can see that it actually snaps to that point while your pointer's pointing at it. So you can see when we go up, you can control whereabouts the user moves to. And that's quite a simple setup. In this case, they're just using a blueprint. And that blueprint has a capsule component. So we detect whether we're over it. That's pretty much it. We're not actually using the capsule for anything other than a detection to say if the player's in there, it could do something else. But the cylinder itself is what controls it. We have a tag set up on this. So tag snap location. So anything with this tag, you'll snap to its center point. So in this case, it's the cylinder. So on this wall, we could do act tag snap location, and it would snap to the center point of there. So it would be down here. So that's something to just keep in mind. But in this case, we do have a VR interaction for custom event. So snap location hover. And what this does is if you use this interface, or so use this event from it, so snap location hover, as soon as the teleport trace hits it and it locks into place, you can tell it to do something. So in this case, I changed the material. So you can kind of have it so you know if you're hovered over the correct thing or not. And then you can do a whole bunch of other stuff with this. So that's just one example as well. So that is the tag-based. So there's only two tag-based systems in here. That's the snap location and the cube for the can climb. So that's pretty much it to remember. Let's have a look at what else I've got on my list. Extras. So I am working on some more stuff for this, specifically working on some kind of weapons and that, so interactables. So I've got bow and arrow, that's going to be in there, as well as doors and door handles. So the door handles are going to be separate, so you can rotate them around, and then the doors will be able to follow those. A security keypad and like a pin pad, and then a security card that you can pick up and activate to open the armory. The door is a bit of fun interaction in there. So that's just something that will be coming soon as well. Two-handed grabbing I need to work on. So you can pick up the guns and then rotate them as you'd wish. So it'd be quite nice to have that set up. I am working on a save game example. So if you were to start this, you could choose the settings that you'd like and then have it save so the next time you launch the game, it kind of remembers what's going on. Body holsters, so you can attach actors to yourself or to the player, same as what I've done in other videos. And then a VR watch. So there's a few things that I've got on the list to go further with this, and I'd love to hear what you kind of want me to add into it, because I think there's a lot of potential to keep working on this and add more content for you guys to either use or learn from, and just make VR development a little bit smoother and a little bit easier to understand. Like it is, everything in this is done with blueprints. There's no C++. So if you're just starting out, you should be able to wrap your head around it. And I've kind of kept everything as clean and as easy as possible. So we open the player. It looks really complex, but overall we've got shift movement, snap rotation, a couple of timers which go off, set hands based on the platform, hand inputs, smooth locomotion. You kind of get the gist, and you can kind of go through this and see where everything is and where everything's coming from. and that's it. That's the basis of everything that's included. I am currently working on the Steam side of it, so the Valve Index. I can't think of any other Steam headsets, but that kind of element, I'm working on that, so I'll pick it up, so you can use this with the Steam plugin as well. That is a work in progress. I need to test that all out afterwards. But for now, that's kind of it on there. So I think that's it for this explanation of what's going on and how to do stuff. But basically, it's kind of just jump in and have a play around. I am working on this as fast as I can to add as much as I can before it goes live. And then once it is, I'll let everybody know. But before then, a big thank you to all my Patreons for making this possible. Without you guys, I wouldn't have been able to put the time into this. As I said, it is available for Patreons right now, so if you want to go over there and download this to have a play around using your own projects, you can do. Just be aware there is a couple of bugs, and it's probably not in the best place to start working from, but it should give you a good start if you kind of get the idea of what's going on in the template. So until then, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.